Okay, mating systems and parental care. This is a really neat lecture because it ties together several different things. It ties together sexual selection and parental investment with basic mating systems across most animal groups, at least applies to vertebrates and invertebrates, and very pervasive patterns that are of interest to a lot of people, with some kind of really neat complications at the end about how sexual selection and sexual conflict plays into trade-offs between parental care and genetic quality issues. So we're going to talk about the sort of very general basic relationship between mating systems and parental care, kind of a traditional old school view in some sense. And then we'll talk about what I call the myth of monogamy, which has been really revealed by genetic techniques in recent years. So we'll distinguish between social monogamy, which is with a pair bond, and genetic monogamy, which is really the currency of evolution. And then when we get to sexual conflict and look at the interplay of all these things, we'll figure out that there's actually a lot of complexity in mating systems that really was not appreciated until the last 20, 25 years or so, with genetic testing of paternity and how that's really changed our view of animal mating systems and the complex interrelationships and trade-offs between some of these different factors. So we'll start with the basics. Monogamy means one male and one female that are reproducing together, and socially monogamous or social monogamy means that there's some kind of enduring pair bond between that male and female partnership. Polyandry means that females typically mate with multiple males. Polygyny means some males mate with several females. And promiscuity means both males and females mate multiply. Now, the difference between polyandry and polygyny is related to some of these differences in sexual selection. So with polygyny, we see that if a few males mate with several females, that means many other males don't mate at all. And the variation in male mating success under polygyny is likely higher than the variation in female mating success under polyandry, whereas even under polyandry, most females would mate with somebody, even if it's not with multiple males under polyandry. So there is an association between the parental care patterns in animals and these very, very basic, broad categories of mating system. Now, there's going to be lots and lots of exceptions, so don't take this table too close to your heart. But under monogamy, it's often the case that both males and females provide parental care of some kind. It could be food, it could be protection, it could be a territory, all those sorts of things that would be investment in the kids, in the survivorship of the kids, that comes at a cost to the parent. Those are resources allocated to parental care that cannot be used for something else, such as seeking additional matings, for example. So parental investment is that the parental care that increases the survivorship of current offspring at the expense of the parent producing future offspring. And as I say, with monogamy, it's typically the case, or often the case, that both males and females invest that kind of parental care in the offspring. Polyandry, often the case that males only provide that parental care and females don't, although there's certainly plenty of examples where both males and females provide some parental care. Uh, Polygyny or polygyny, it's typically the case that females are the only ones that invest further in the offspring. And with promiscuity, both males and females mating multiple times, the most common case is no parental care at all. And in fact, for almost all insects, for example, both males and females mate multiply, and there's no parental care whatsoever. A little less common in vertebrates to have no parental care, but it certainly happens. So there's a possibility of sexual conflict over parental care. So if you remember, I said, well, parental care is parental investment in current offspring at the expense of not producing future offspring or producing fewer future offspring. So the reduction in future fitness is this sort of opportunity cost to males and females of investing in current offspring. And because of the differences between males and females, when we talked about sexual selection, this leads to a conflict over who would pay that future opportunity cost versus who would not pay that future opportunity cost. So if you remember back, male reproductive success is limited by access to females and their big gametes, and female reproductive success is limited by resources and male quality. So you might expect that males might abandon a female to search for other females, future mating opportunities, and females might abandon a male to search for more or better resources. If she can get him to take care of the kids, then she can forage more and gain the resources necessary to make more of those large gametes. So both sex has an incentive to get the other one to provide more parental care and for them to provide less parental care. And which sex is the most likely to desert, basically give up on the kids and not provide parental care, is in most cases the males. And this is affected by a number of things, and it depends very much on the natural history and physiology and evolutionary lineage of the organisms that we're talking about. But in many cases, males have greater opportunity to desert the kids than females do, just because fertilization and production of the kids are separated in time. So mating and fertilization, the male could leave after fertilization, but the female can't leave until after egg laying or birth or something like that. So females have greater proximity to the zygotes than males do, just because of how fertilization works. This is, again, a generality for most animals. Now, the book says that males are more likely to desert because males have more to gain by remating. And that's, I think it glosses over the fact that females can have considerable fitness to gain from remating or not taking care of the kids and getting more resources for future offspring production. So I think you really want to look at it as who has more net benefit from not caring for the kids. So this is the benefit to males of leaving the kids versus the cost that the males would pay for leaving those kids is often greater than that net benefit to females. So the cost here is you could lose the current kids, right? If kids require parental investment and they don't get it, then maybe they die, and that would be a cost to the parents. So if we consider the case of the cost occurs if the other partner also deserts the kids and doesn't provide parental care, then you can see that males have less to lose if females also desert. So basically, if both of them abandon the kids and the kids die, then females lose a larger proportion of their potential lifetime reproductive success than males do. Back to females invest more resources in the large gametes, right? So if both desert and the kids die, the males lose less than the females do. So that I think is what sets the asymmetry between males and females, where males are typically, across most animals, more likely to provide less parental care than females are. But there's a lot of complication and exceptions and subtlety that we'll look at. So, which sex deserts? We already talked about proximity and the opportunity for desertion through sort of association of females with zygotes, whereas males are associated with gametes. Trivers pointed out that it's also affected by paternity certainty. So this is the how confident the males are that they are actually the genetic parent. So when a female animal lays eggs or has kids, gives birth, whatever she does in her life history, those offspring are always genetically hers. If she's investing parental care into eggs or offspring that came from her, she's definitely investing that parental care into her genetic offspring. Whereas males, that may or may not be true. When females mate multiply, then the male that's paired with a female may or may not be raising kids that are genetically his or not. So that's his certainty of paternity. If there's high certainty of paternity, then those kids genetically are very likely to be his, and that favors his further investment in those offspring compared to if they're less likely to be genetically his kids. That might make males less likely to invest in future parental care. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about extra pair copulations and things. It's not necessarily the case that males and females are thinking about paternity certainty. It could just be that the parental care patterns evolve differently in lineages that have a long evolutionary history of high paternity certainty versus one's evolutionary lineages that have a long history of low paternity certainty. So paternity certainty in the mating system can sort of set the evolutionary background against which the costs and benefits of male parental care are sort of screened by natural selection. Phylogenetic or evolutionary history also plays a very big role, right? Organisms with internal fertilization, such as mammals, have a very different kind of set of constraints about who's associated with the kids for how long compared to other evolutionary lineages. So, for example, if you think of placental mammals, there's a long period of gestation where the female is associated with the zygote and the developing fetus, and there's mandatory parental care of lactation after birth, or the kids won't survive. So, in placental mammals, some kind of maternal care is essentially obligatory if the kids are going to survive. So if the females didn't provide parental care, then the kids would certainly die. whether the males do or not will vary based on other factors, right? Here's a neat set of data on fish. So fish have all kinds of mating systems that are really fascinating, and there's a lot of male parental care, a lot of female parental care. Lots of species have no parental care, so it's kind of a perfect group to test some of these ideas about the opportunity for desertion, because there's lots of variation and very diverse groups, and there's internal fertilizing fish and there's external fertilizing fish, which would affect the length of association of males and females with those zygotes. So this is a pretty old data set now, but on different teleost fish families, the teleosts are the bony fishes, basically everything you think of as a fish, except not sharks and skates and rays. So there's huge diversity. Some of them have internal fertilization, so the females have longer association with the kids than the males do, whereas some have external fertilization, which the sexes then have sort of simultaneous opportunity to desert. And these data are the number of families that have male-only parental care versus female-only parental care versus no parental care. And they're just divided up by whether the fertilization is internal or external. And you can see that in the case of internal fertilization, that leads to much higher incidence of female-only parental care in these different across these different fish families. There's actually more families where males provide parental care that are external fertilizers than internal. The internal ones would be the things like the pipefish and seahorses. And on the right is a picture of a cardinal fish doing what's called mouth brooding. This is a male who, I don't know if you can see this, in his mouth there are the eggs. So their males might make a sort of nest area on the substrate, attract a female. She lays the eggs. He fertilizes the eggs externally, and then to protect them from egg predators, as well as pathogens and things, he'll carry them around in his mouth. So he's effectively sort of a brooding male guarding and protecting those eggs. So that's happening only with that kind of external fertilization on the substrate. So polyandry is when females mate multiply. It's very widespread in invertebrates and in invertebrates as well. And there's a variety of different ideas to explain, well, why do females mate multiply? If you think back to the Bateman experiment with Drosophila, if you remember, this is reproductive success as a function of the number of mates. Male reproductive success continued to increase with number of mates, and female reproductive success did something like this. This is females and this is males. So for a long time, it was sort of a bit of a mystery. Well, if that's the fitness function for females with remating, then why do they remate? And there were a variety of ideas proposed, such as some different genetic or material benefits about female remating rates and the optimal mating rates of females that showed that there are benefits to females of a remating more than what you'd infer from Bateman's experiments with Drosophila. So in most organisms studied since, female fitness as a function of number of mates actually does something more like this, and actually can decrease at really high numbers of mates. due to some of those toxic chemicals that males transfer in sperm when you have high rates of female multiple mating. So the Bateman curve is still instructive, but it's not quite as it's more complicated than was originally shown by Bateman in Drosophila. Anyway, some of the potential genetic benefits of female remating, a bunch of ideas have been tested. Fertility insurance, basically, if a female happens to be paired to a male who's sterile, then she would lose all of her evolutionary fitness unless she had more than one mate. So that would reduce the multiple mating would reduce the cost of having an infertile mate. Good genes ideas. Females could mate multiply and acquire fitness benefits to the offspring through good genes kind of selection. Genetic compatibility is sort of a variation of good genes. It's the idea that there aren't good genes necessarily in an absolute sense, but that certain types of genes would be complementary to her genetic makeup. So, for example, immune system genes are very, very diverse, and having kids that are heterozygous for immune system genes would give them even more genetic variation to potentially respond to, recognize, and fight off a variety of diseases. So a female might be sort of evolutionarily incentivized to mate with a male who has immune system genes that are different from hers. There's not necessarily that one set is better than the other, but if she mates with a male who has immune system genes different from hers, then her kids are likely to be heterozygous and get the benefit of both sets of immune system genes. So that's kind of a good genes argument based on the compatibility and variety of genomes rather than strictly, oh, it's a good immune system allele or a bad immune system allele. What's good is the variety of immune system alleles, for example. Other than genetic benefits, people have proposed material benefits, resources for the female or the offspring. So these could be resources for the current offspring, or when the resources are for the female herself, that could be resources that she can invest in future offspring, right? Material benefits can include protection of the female or the offspring from harassment from other males or from predators, potentially. A lot of variety in mating systems. So all of those things have been proposed in have varying levels of support in different kinds of animal groups. Material benefits, polyandry is definitely well described in some of the katydids. The Choanophyllonarti is a type of katydid where males produce one of those really large spermatophylax food gifts that you saw previously with the katydid Ephipiger. And Gwynn and Bailey showed that when males are able to produce this large nuptial food gift, they're basically eating pollen to get the high quality food to make this nutritious nuptial gift. They become a limiting resource for females, and when they call, females compete to be the first one there as a scramble competition. The first one to get to that male is more likely to mate and get that food resource, which is then invested in production of eggs and offspring. And females will do that over and over and over again with any available calling males. And in fact, Gwynn and Bailey were able to show that there's selection on female auditory systems. So the male katydids make a chirp chirp kind of sound, and females that can detect that better get there faster in the scramble competition. So there's been sort of sensory selection on female ability to get these additional resources by mating with the additional males in these katydids. In sex role reversal, which we talked about before, is if females compete for males. So if males are providing enough resources to the females or the kids, in other words, these material benefits is what we're still talking about. If those material benefits are high and limit female reproduction, then females might fight for males and those resources. So this is a photo of a male wattled jacana incubating eggs from a female. They live on sort of ponds and water lily type environments, and the males do almost all of the parental care. The females are bigger than the males. The females are more ornate. The females fight for the territories, and females basically collect a little harem of males that are sort of incubators of the eggs. So it's real like harem mating system, but it's the female that has a harem of males, and what those males are providing is the material benefits of investment in incubation of her egg clutches. So under polygyny, there's multiple types of polygyny that have been described. Female defense polygyny, like happens in many ungulates, deer and antelope kind of organisms. So this is a male, and this is his harem of females, and he's defending those females from other males. And if a female tries to wander off too far, he'll harass her and chase her back to his harem. So he's defending the females directly, whereas in elephant seals, males defend a resource that females need for mating. So the males come up on these beaches that females use to give birth. Males do defend the females directly, but they'll also defend that stretch of beach from other males before the females even show up. So females need the beach as a mating resource. So by males defending that resource, the winners end up with a harem of females. Leks we've seen before. These are sage grouse. No, those aren't. Those are prairie chickens. That have which are also in the grouse family. They have these lek displays where females visit, and there's no resource that males are defending, and they're also not defending the females. It's just a display territory that the females visit and pick a male, and then the females leave and do all the parental care on their own. Monogamy is a very interesting kind of case. So monogamy, if the ancestral condition is that females have greater association with the offspring and greater parental investment than males do, then the males, for selection to favor the males who stay at home with those kids in that pair bond instead of going off seeking other mates, that only really happens when that future reproduction has low chances of happening. So remember, if you think about this as a trade-off between current reproduction and future reproduction, when either parent invests in the current offspring, they're doing that at a cost of reduction in future potential offspring, right? So if the likelihood that males would encounter future females is really low, then what he's giving up, that opportunity cost, is actually very low as well. So basically, if the male has no chance of ever finding another female ever again, then he's not really giving up anything by staying with the current one. The opportunity cost of future reproduction is really non existent because his chances of finding and encountering and mating with another female are so low. And there's a variety of reasons that could be the case. In mammals, it's been shown that monogamy is predicted by female dispersal in space. So if females are separated very far apart in small territories, then males are within a breeding season. Males are unable to defend multiple male females simultaneously. So if there's a short breeding system and females are really dispersed in space, then a male that mates with one female can't gain more by going and seeking other females because they're far away and will have already mated with someone else. There's other factors that can change the likelihood of males' future reproductive success with additional females, this opportunity cost of future reproduction. For example, within a species, if males are, very healthy, fit, ornate, have a lot of resources, then they might be more attractive to additional females than males that are, ugly or whatever, or poor. So a mate that is, good looking with lots of money might sound great, but that mate also has higher opportunity to attract other females in the future. So that mate is paying a greater opportunity cost of being monogamous than a male that is less attractive with less resources. In other animals, social monogamy is the rule in birds, maybe 90% of species. But it turns out that genetic monogamy is really rare, and that's what we'll talk about with the myth of monogamy and the complexity in mating systems. In insects, promiscuity is the rule, but monogamy does occur with some interesting kind of twists. The burying beetle Nicrophorus diphodians, kind of neat example. Here they are. This is a snazzy looking adult beetle, and these big white grub type things, those are beetle larvae. And what's happening, the reason they're called burying beetles is they search out, the adults search out a dead mouse or something like that in the environment, and that's a great resource for beetle larvae to develop on. So once they encounter that dead mouse, they bury it under the ground. The male will signal to a female, "Hey, I got a great dead mouse over here. Want to come play?" And if they mate, the female would lay eggs on it. So this ball of goo down here is actually kind of rotting, decomposing mouse or some other organism in the environment, and the larvae are feeding on that. And that's a big important resource for reproduction in the burying beetles, and males and females take care of those offspring and protect them and protect that food resource from other competitors. So males and females work cooperatively as a monogamous pair, but there's still conflict or the potential for conflict. So this is a neat experiment where they showed that female bearing beetles, they attack males that try to advertise for additional mates. So if a male finds a dead mouse and he emits these pheromone chemicals to attract a female, and they become a pair. If the male starts to send out pheromones into the environment to attract additional females, the female, his mate, will physically attack him and kind of beat him up and say, "Hey, knock that off." And you can see the difference in how long males were able to emit these pheromones to attract additional mates when the female meaning his primary mate was either tethered with a little string so she couldn't get to him and couldn't attack him, versus untethered. And what you see is that the females that were tethered, that couldn't get to the guy and beat him up and stop him from releasing those pheromones, those males emitted pheromones for longer period of time and could potentially attract future mates. So even with monogamy in these burying beetles, there's still a sexual conflict over how much investment and how much current versus future reproduction with other females. So neat kind of complexity. All right, we have to talk about avian monogamy because for decades and decades and decades, the birds were thought to be monogamous. Most species, I just mentioned, like 90% of bird species were thought to be monogamous, and they are socially monogamous. But the genetic data has shown that they're not genetically monogamous. So it's now clear that lots of bird species which appear to be monogamous in pair bonded partnership are actually fooling around, and that there are what are called extra pair copulations, or EPCs. So extra pair just means outside of the pair. So you have a male and female pair, but both males and females will seek copulations with other individuals that are outside of that pair. So this is a really old table of data, but a variety of species. You can see this is behavioral data, extra pair copulations that were observed by researchers, and then with DNA fingerprinting, they were able to show what percent of the broods, meaning the nests, have some extra pair paternity, and even what percent of the offspring were fathered by a male other than the social mate. And you can see that those are pretty high. I mean, often 30, 40, 50% of nests have at least one extra pair kid, and maybe a third of all the kids in several species were shown to be genetically fathered by someone other than the social mate. Here's a really amazing case. I call it the champion cheater. These are really snazzy birds called superb fairy wrens that live in Australia. They are socially monogamous. They're socially pair bonded, a male and a female, but 95% of nests contain at least one extra pair young. And in fact, 76% of the offspring in the nest were not fathered by the social male that was in attendance with the female. So when basically what's happening is the males spend so much time fooling around with other females, searching out other females for extra pair copulations, that they're not around their own territory that much, so their female is also fooling around. But still, it pays the male to invest some in these offspring, because that means about 24% on average are fathered by him in his own nest, and he probably has kids scattered around the neighborhood as well. Here's some interesting data on female extrapair copulations, for a while it wasn't clear whether extrapair copulations were the result of males seeking out copulations with additional females, or if females were also seeking out extrapair copulations with additional males. And here's some data on hooded warblers that looked at the time that females spend on their territory versus off of their territory as a function of whether or not they're fertile or not fertile. So, the birds pair up, they build a nest, they defend a territory, but the female's not ovulating, and then she enters that fertile period where she actually could have eggs fertilized by a mate. And what you see is that 6 out of 7 females in their non-fertile period stayed entirely on their territory. But only 3 out of however many that is, 9, 11, 13 females that in their fertile period stayed exclusively on their territory. Females in their fertile period spent more time kind of cruising around the neighborhood than females did when they were in their non-fertile period, suggesting that females are kind of checking out who else is around and potentially available as not as a social mate, but as a genetic hookup kind of mate. So this work on extrapair copulations has tried to test some of these ideas about why females mate multiply, and in short, that fertility insurance hypothesis that I talked about has really not been well supported across most species of birds, because the social mate typically also fathers some of the offspring. That shows that he was not infertile. So the fertility insurance does not apply super well to bird extrapair copulations. It doesn't mean it wouldn't be a factor in many other multiple mating groups like certain insects and so on. Material benefits in the case of birds is also not well supported, because the females that extrapair copulate are not gaining material resources. They're still paired with their social mate on their social mate territory, right? So a female is paired with one male, and they have a nest together and a territory together. But when she goes sort of off into the neighboring territories and seeks an extrapair copulation, she doesn't get the resources of those territories. So in the case of bird extrapair copulations, material benefits is also not a very well supported reason why female birds are doing this. Good genes ideas do have some support. Here's an example of blue tits, which are really cute little European bird species, and there's selection based on the male song. So what's called the strophe length is part of the sound, the bird call. And what you can see is that the proportion of extrapair young in a male's nest is strongly related to how good his song is. So if he has a song with a long strophe length, then the kids in his nest are his. The proportion of extrapair young is 0. So he keeps the paternity in his nest, whereas the males that have a strophe length down, between 1 and 1.5 seconds long, lots of the kids in their nests are not genetically theirs. Um, I don't know what that average would be, maybe 50% across those ones that I circled. So males with that particular song type, their mates are fooling around with other males and getting the genes from those other males, but not resources from them. And here's the proportion of extra pair young in the nest across 4 years of study. A whole bunch of birds are genetically monogamous as well as socially monogamous, but a whole bunch of birds are also um, not, right? So there's a considerable number of nests, about half of the nests have some extra pair uh, offspring fathered by someone else in the nest. And uh, why this is presented as a good genes extra pair copulation is that the males that lost paternity, these are the ones with the lousy songs, the short strophe songs, the ones that lost paternity had lower survivorship than the males that did not lose paternity. So this is the graph of males up here. The dark bars are ones that they have crappy songs, and their females were fooling around, and you can see that only around 25% of them even survived to the next year, whereas the males that in the light bars that have a good fancy song and do not lose paternity in their own nest, they have more than double the average survivorship to the next year. So that's why this is presented as a good genes argument. Basically, females are fooling around on their mates if their mates have a lousy song and low chances of surviving to the next year. Now, there's no effect with the females. The female survivorship and extra pair young is not different. So females, it's not that the females are in lousy condition or unlikely to survive, is that they fool around on their mates if their mates are in lousy condition and unlikely to survive. So you can see there's big differences in the males with very low p-values, minimal differences in the females with p-values that are not significantly different. Here's interesting data on this idea of certainty of paternity and parental care. So if the kids might not be yours, then you might reduce the investment in them if you're a male, right? The kids in your nest are almost always going to be yours if you're a female bird. There can be, cowbirds and cuckoos, interspecific nest parasitism, and sometimes there's intraspecific nest parasitism called egg dumping. But basically, if you're a female bird and there's chicks in your nest, they're almost always yours. So it pays females on average to provide parental care to those chicks. Males, as you can see from all the genetic data we've talked about, is often the case that at least some of the chicks in your nest are not genetically yours if you're a male bird. And by doing an experiment where they trapped females, so basically they have these collared flycatchers that are paired up as males and females on a territory, and as they're preparing to, the nest and getting ready to lay eggs, they would use little nets and traps, and they would trap the female when she's not in her fertile period, or for 1 hour during the period when she is fertile, or for 2 hours during the period when she is fertile. So the idea here is that the male is on his territory with his mate, and then she disappears for uh, 1 or 2 hours, and uh, if she's disappeared and then she comes back, then the researchers let her go. She rejoins the mate and is on the territory, and the eggs hatch, and then they recorded how much food the males brought to the nestlings. This is feeds per nestling per hour. This is the male parental care or paternal care. If the female disappeared during her non-fertile period, which is the controls, then males brought around 3 food items per nestling per hour. And if she disappeared for 1 or 2 hours, then they reduced the amount of food that they brought to those nestlings. The dark bars are for when the nestlings are 6 days old, and you get the same kind of thing when the nestlings are 11 days old. If she disappeared during the non-fertile period, maybe 3.5, and then a reduction in paternal care. If those chicks or some of those chicks were maybe less likely to be his because she disappeared during her fertile period. All right, now it's going to get really complicated because we're going to try to integrate kind of all these different things of sexual conflict and trade-offs of current and future reproduction, sexual selection, parental care, the benefits of remating to females, material benefits versus good genes, genetic benefits with extra pair copulations. And this is related to the Moeller and Thornhill paper for the paper discussion. So this will be a sort of preview of some of the complexity that's in that paper. So what they noticed as studies of extra pair copulations and parental care and sexual selection and ornamentation started to accumulate, people recognized that sometimes in some species more ornamented males provide more parental care, and in other species more ornamented males provide less parental care. So for example, this is a male house finch with a fancy red carotenoid based ornamentation, and females prefer that more ornamented males. And here's some different species, the yellowhammer, where they also have a carotenoid based yellow ornamentation, and females prefer that yellow ornament. And in some species, these more ornamented males provide more parental care, like it's that ornament is a signal like, hey, I'm a good provider, I provide lots of parental care. And in other species, the more ornamented males provide less parental care. So at first it seems like it's just a mess, different species do different things, how do we make sense of this? Here's an example of a species in which more ornamented males provide less parental care. This is a bird called the bearded tit, and this black mark is the beard thing. And what you can see is male time incubating the kids and male feeding of the kids goes down as a function of beard length. Females prefer males with longer beards. I mean, who wouldn't, right? So this beard is an ornament, and longer beards are sexier to females, and males with longer beards provide less parental care. So this is the correlation between the ornament, beard length, and some measure of parental care. And here, this correlation R is some negative number, right? If you look at extra pair chicks in the nest as a function of bird length, males with nice long beards, the kids in their nest are always theirs. Males with crummy short beards have a high chance of some of the kids in their nest belonging, genetically to someone else. So females are females that are mated to males with short beards are seeking out extra pair copulations with different males with longer beards. And that's what kind of culminates in this Moeller and Thornhill paper, where they looked at the correlation coefficient between ornamentation and parental care and the percent of extra pair paternity, and got this negative relationship, which is really intriguing in terms of what it is that females get out of extra pair copulations. So let's just kind of break this down. Like here's a point. This is each point on here is a different species of bird. So this correlation coefficient kind of split the graph at the 0 point. So here there's positive correlations, and there's negative correlations. This is the correlation between ornamentation and parental care. So these ones that have this species that has a positive correlation between ornamentation and parental care would be something like a cardinal, which is a bright red bird. The more ornamented males are basically better dads. They incubate more, they feed the kids more. So there's a positive correlation in cardinals between ornamentation and parental care, and they have almost no extra pair young in that species. So positive relationship, sexier males are better dads, and the females are not fooling around. Now pick some other species where there's a negative correlation between ornamentation and parental care. This could be the bearded tit, for example. So there's we're down here on the correlation part. It's a negative correlation, so more ornamented males are providing less parental care. That's the negative correlation coefficient on this axis. And there's a whole lot of extra pair paternity on this axis. So across all these different species, you have a negative relationship between extra pair paternity and the relationship between ornamentation and parental care. And this is what's suggested in the paper to be related to what it is that females would get from extra pair copulations. So if you think about ones that are up here that have a positive relationship between ornamentation and parental care, they're selecting for, when they pick a more ornamented mate, they're picking a better dad. They're picking an indicator of material resources, material benefits. And if she mated with some other guy with an extra pair copulation, she doesn't get any additional material benefits because she stays on her territory, right? Whereas the ones that have this negative correlation down here and have high extra pair paternity, those are species in which it's suggested that females are seeking extra pair copulations for good genes benefits. So in these, the ornament reflects something about male genetic quality, not his being a good dad, but that genetic quality could be passed to the offspring of any female that mates with him, whether she's the social partner or not. So that's the argument and data of the Moeller and Thornhill paper for the paper discussion. So interesting, complicated relationships among these birds, and no one had any idea any of this was happening before DNA paternity testing of birds became possible. The standard thinking on birds for 50, 60, 70 years was that, oh, look, they're monogamous pair bonds and all of this cool complexity that actually does make sense in terms of sexual selection, good genes, material resource benefits. Was no one had any clue that any of this was happening. So that's the end. I'll stop there.